Help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Nun Vav. We are searching for an understanding L'shitas Rabbi Yehuda that we learned in the Mishnah Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, that Rabbi Yehuda says there was only one golden stand in the Beis HaMikdash. And the initial approach of explaining Rabbi Yehuda was to connect it to that which we learn in Shkolim. That when we know that there were 13 shofros in the Azara, and 2 of the 13 were designated for bird karbanos, one of them had written on it kinin, the other one had written on it goizlei oila. Says Rabbi Yehuda, neither of them were for someone who was mechuyev to bring bird karbanos. Both of them were for nedava, bird karbanos. And the initial approach was because Rabbi Yehuda held that simply by writing on the shofaros what they are designated for, that's not enough to guarantee that a confusion will not happen. And if a person gave chayvus, which means one of them is a karban chatos, and the kohen who removed it will make a confusion and will think that they are both for nedava, because if it's not obligatory, both birds are for nedava, then he will do the avoida of the bird oila on the chatos, which will invalidate it. So therefore, we knew all of them were for nedavas. That was the initial approach, and that would be the link. And therefore, in our Mishnah, how can you have 2 stands of gold? How would you know which one was for the par and which one was for the soir? And the answer will be because you'll write on it par and soir. But Rabbi Yehuda is afraid that just writing on it, its designation is not enough to prevent confusion. That was the initial approach, and the counter to that is that no, the Mishnah writes befedish and shkolim. Let's go with Rabbi Yehuda. Both of them were for nedava, but still one of them was for toirim, the other one was for bnei yoina. Kavan had a gavaldika picture just for you to know what exactly is the turtle dove and what is the bnei yoina pigeon, young pigeon. Well, these had different values. They cost a different amount of money. If Rabbi Yehuda holds that just writing its designation is not enough to prevent confusion, a pashat akasha. Maybe you're going to take the person who gave money for the toirim, and you're going to take his carbon from the bnei yoina, or vice versa. So you see that we rely on that which was written on the shofaros. So the reason for Rabbi Yehuda and Shekalim, which does not allow for neither of those shofaros to be for those who are mechuyev to bring bird karbanos, has nothing to do with Rabbi Yehuda holding that just writing the designation is not enough of a mechanism through which to prevent confusion, which obviously will mean, that's where we left it open, why taka does Rabbi Yehuda hold in our Mishnah that you can't have 2 stands, that we'll have to get back to. But where we are focusing right now is, why does Rabbi Yehuda hold in Shkolim that no shofar for kinei chayvas were allowed to be used? So we left off. The answer is that Rabbi Yehuda was afraid that maybe the owner, after depositing his or her money in that shofar, will pass away prior to them bringing this carbon. And being that some of the money is for a chatos, and we already learned the rule that if the animal is already here and the owner passes away, the animal has to be left to die. If money was designated for a chatos, and then the owner passes away, the money has to be destroyed by throwing it into the Yam HaMelech, by throwing it into other bodies of water, or maybe grinding it up and throwing it into other bodies of water. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda felt that we need to have the owner here. You don't put it in a box and walk away. When you give it to the kohen knows that you are alive while he brings it. That's where we left off, and we're going to give continuation, and we're going to clarify that. Ultimately, we will understand that Rabbi Yehuda holds that we don't say Bereira. So this will be the famous daf in Shas that we have many times regarding Bereira. Bereira means retroactive clarification. And a great example will be, as we learned the sugya. So when you put money in a box, and let's say if we know the owner passes away, we just don't know which bag belongs to which owner. We already said yesterday that every owner put their money in a standalone bag, not to confuse the money from one to the money for the other. Meaning, even though when the kohen brings the karbanos, he doesn't know who is the owner of these karbanos, but we have to have this person's karbanos together. We don't want for anyone to take money from one person and some other money for the other person. Like one bird belongs to one bird belonging to the other, that will not be good. So every bag was separated. But if we know that the owner passed away, we know the owner passed away, if you subscribe to the concept of retroactive clarification, then all the kohen will need to do is take the money that is of the value of a chatos and throw that liyam hamelech. And on the rest, bring linadava. You can bring it linadava. Which money is lachatas, which money is la'ina? If you subscribe to retroactive clarification, you can say the money that you threw away belonged to that person who passed away, and that was for his chatas. If you do not subscribe to Bereina, if you don't hold that you can make as a retroactive clarification, then such a thing cannot be done. And really, that will be the biur in the machlokes and shkalim, whether you can have a shofar for chayva or not. Rabbi Yehuda leis leibreida, and we're going to try to find another source throughout Shas. Where else do we see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda does not subscribe to breida? We have this very often. We bring the din of buying wine right before Shabbos, or buying wine when you don't have other kelim into which to put the trumas or maasros. We're going to learn over there a din whether you can make a verbal statement that what I will separate later will be truma, what I will separate later will be meiser, whether that is a proper way of separating b'di'evet, initially linking it whether you subscribe to Bereda or not, because if you subscribe to Bereda, then what you will separate tomorrow retroactively is already separated. So therefore what you drank yesterday was already not tevel. Or whether you don't subscribe to tevel, you can't make such a verbal declaration. We'll speak it out again when we learn it inside. That din ultimately has nothing to do with Bereda, but we have what's called the Braisa of Ayoy. Guys, we learned this many times, and we're going to review some Gavaldik Dinim of Eruvei Techumen. And over there is clearly where we see that Rabbi Yehuda leislei Bereda. So we will clarify the reason of Rabbi Yehuda's not allowing for there to be a shofar for the birds of chayva, because Rabbi Yehuda does not subscribe to Bereda. This has nothing to do with our Mishnah. We're going to have to find a new reason why in our Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda does not allow for you to have 2 stands and chevra a lot more. Let us continue. We left off on Daf Nun Hey Amid Beis, 8 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The first approach was, that's where we were up to, is that Rabbi Yehuda was afraid that maybe the owner of that bag of money for a chayva will pass away prior to the kohen bringing both birds. And if that happened, then the money that was designated for the chatos has to be destroyed and it may not be used. Now, Chevra, this is touching on, these are big shas sugyas, right? Cheskas chayim. When you leave a person, if he was living, are we halachically, do we have to take into account maybe that person passed away? Or do we say that person was alive, the chazaka that this person is alive continues until proven otherwise? There's a cheskas chayim. And indeed, Rabbi Yehuda holds of that chazaka. And Rabbi Yehuda does not have this concept of we have to have a fear, maybe the person passed away. Where do we see that? The Hotnan, we have a Mishnah in Gittin. Hashaleach chatosei mimedina sayam gavaldik. Taka by kotchim. Person sends a carbon chatas, an animal, or money. There's no communication as we have today. When it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, it's a few days later, it's a few weeks later, it can be a few months later. Does the Beis HaMikdash have to say maybe the owner passed away? The Mishnah says no. Makriven oisoi, because becheskas shu kayim. That's called, there's a cheskas chayim. Now, of course, if the person was terminally ill, it's different. If a person is terminally ill, don't put money in the box that's designated for kinei chayva. So Rabbi Yehuda doesn't have a fear, Shema mesu ba'alel. So here the Gemara finalizes by tweaking it, Ela mishum chata shemesu ba'alel vadai. What's going to happen if there's taka shofar for kinei chayva? And today you had 100 people putting money in it. And we know now that one of them passed away. We don't know which bag belongs to him. We don't know which. Now, At kind of didn't bother us, because when they would bring the bag, they would buy birds, and the kohen that did the avodah had in mind to whoever it belongs. But now that you know that one owner passed away, you can't have in mind to whoever it belongs, because we know that one owner lepnished. And Mela, the oila bird, doesn't matter. If a Reuven designates a Korban Oila and Reuven passes away, you can still bring the Korban Oila, but that's not the case with the Chatos. And in our case, that you don't even have the animal, you have the money must be destroyed. Gavaldik. So therefore, don't put such a box. So asks the Gemara, v'nivrar arba zuzei. This is the Rashi says that the value of a bird is 4 zuz. So let the kohen that day take from the whole box, from one of the bags, take out 4 zuz, and he should destroy that money v'nishdei b'maya. Whether it's just throwing into it, throwing into Yam HaMelech for sure is good. There's a machlekes rishonim whether if you throw it into any other body of water, if you have to prior to that grind up the coins or not. Okay, whatever. Destroy the money. V'hanach, and all of the rest will be nishtaru. Because why will we not be able to say that the money that was thrown away, that was destroyed, is designated, belongs to the owner who passed away? And then, by the way, the Chachamim hold you do just that. That's why the Chachamim hold you can have a box for the kinim of Chayva. Elama, that's the word that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't subscribe to this concept, to this mechanism known as Breira, as retroactive clarification. If you subscribe to Breira, you do exactly that. But if you don't subscribe to Breira, you can't do that. And now we're looking, where else would we find it's better? We can just say that's the reason. It's much better if we can find another place where Rabbi Yehuda again says a din based on him not subscribing to the din of Bereira. Just to know, Chevra, Bereira is a Shas Sugya, and we paskin that by Dinei Torah leis lon Bereira, and by the Rabbanans we do follow Bereira. Okay, so Mina lon Gavaldik. So Lema Mohadetnan. Now this is really a Braisa. Gavaldik halakeyach yain mebein hakutim erev Shabbos. That's one version. Im chashecha. If a person buys wine from the kutim are the nation of people who, under pressure from fear of being unnaturally eaten up by lions, they made a giur, they converted, it's called geirei aroyos, and throughout Shas we have this machlokes whether we consider their gerus a valid gerus or not, and this is so nigeya here, just to have a few nekudas. Nekuda number 1, a goy who owns land in Eretz Yisrael, even though the ownership is not as much as a Yiddish ownership, it's ownership enough that which grows in his or in her land is not obligated to be tithed. Midoiraisa. Midrabanan, it is obligated to be tithed. Now, if this Braisa follows those who held then that Kutim had a din of a Yisrael, so then the wine that grew from land that belonged to Kutim, they are obligated to be tithed midoiraisa. And even if this Braisa and the Tanoim subscribe to the Kutim not having a bona fide din of Yidin, doesn't matter. You'll have to tithe it midrabanan, prior to which it's tevel. So there's a chiyuv to tithe. Now, 1 second. Kutim, how can you buy wine from Kutim? That's one of the gezeres we learned in Avodah Zarah. So here Rashi writes, like he writes in all the other places, this Braisa was written prior to that gezerah. Now you're not allowed to buy wine from the Kutim. But then you were still allowed to buy yain stam. Yain nesach was asur, yain stam was okay. Another thing, when you buy wine from an Amma Aretz, guys remember, even after we made the takana against the Mai, but at least the Amma Aretz, for sure, would take off Truma Gedoyla. Not the Kutim. Not because the Kutim were not that religious in certain areas. Guys, you remember the beginning of Chulin? One thing was a big problem with the Kutim. Even in the dinim that they kept kosher, they did not interpret Lifnei Iver, Leisit and Michshol the way God meant it. They only understood that kipshutai in their erroneous understanding. They had no problem giving someone else something that's not kosher. So by them, worse than the Amma Aretz, if you buy wine from the Kutim, even when you were still allowed to buy wine from them, you have to presume that nothing was removed. It's mamish tevel, not truma, not meiser, not meiser sheni. Okay, so take it off. So the Braisa is speaking about a scenario where technically you can't. Now there are two versions in this Braisa. Our version is, you bought it from them, mamish, right before Shabbos. And remember, guys, that midrabanan, you're not allowed to tithe on Shabbos. Or, so here you bought it, and the only wine you have for Kiddush is this wine, and it's mamish, it's shkia. Or another version is that you don't have other utensils into which to place the Truma and the Maisa. So that's the challenge. You have wine, the wine could be consumed if you tithe it, obviously. It's something that has a chiyuv to be tithed, and you can't remove it, you don't have where to place it in, or it's too late. So Rav Meir says, no problem. Says Rav Meir, oimed v'oimed. So get up and say. Now, obviously, you can extrapolate. We're speaking about a barrel that has 100 loig. Truma, at least for the Beinani, we established 2%, which will be 2 loig from 100. So oimed v'oimed, shnei lugim sha'ani osid lahafrish harei ein truma. I can't separate it now. I don't have what to put it in. Or it's too late to do it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to miss Shabbos. I have 10 seconds. I can only speak. The 2 loig that I'll separate later is going to be truma. Now really, Meiser Rishon is from what remains. So just what remains now is 98 loig. How much do you have to separate from Meiser Rishon? 9.8. The Brais on Daf Nun Vav is just rounding it off. It's not really 10. He declares 10 or the 9.8 that I will separate will be from Meiser Rishon. What remains now? What remains now is 89, right? 0.8. Or rounded off 90. The Meiser Sheni is only 10% from what remains. So he says, Tisha, Meiser Sheni. Now, this concept of you not needing to finalize the separation, only verbally making a declaration about what you will do, is only a b'di'evet. And therefore, whenever you can really finalize the separation, don't rely only on the verbal designation. And by Meiser Sheni, you can finalize it. How can you finalize it? Even if you can't remove the Meiser Sheni, since there's a din by Meiser Sheni, that you can exchange the Kedusha on money. If you have money, so say, umeichel, and the money that I have in my drawer is going to be used, right, to get the Kedusha of the Meiser Sheni, and therefore the Meiser Sheni is completely chulin, and now the money has to be taken in Yerushalayim and only used for food, drink, etc., to be consumed in Yerushalayim. And now, says Rav Meir, v'shoyse miyad, divrei Rav Meir, daf nun vav amid beis, right, and we have 3 Tanoim argue, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi, and Rab Shimon, they are oisrin. They don't allow for such a statement to be made, and the Havamina is farvas, because it's only going to work if you subscribe to Bereda. That's a great example of Bereda. Because if you hold that there is retroactive clarification, even though now you didn't separate, you didn't even say it's separated now. That will be a problem, because then it's going to be a mixture. When you have truma in with other wine, oy gevalt, you have a demai. You're saying, sha'ani osid lahafrish. So Rav Meir holds, all you need to do is make sure don't drink up the whole barrel. Leave enough to separate later. And when you separate it later, it went lemafreya. And therefore, since it went lemafreya, so when you drank it on Shabbos, you drank mesukin wine. They don't subscribe to Bereda. When you'll separate it Sunday, Matzoi Shabbos Sunday, mikano lahaba, you're good. But it doesn't go back retroactively. So when you consumed it on Shabbos, you consume tevel. Whether it is midairaisa, because a kuti has a din of a yid, whether a kuti has a din of a goy, and it's only midrabanan. So what? Midrabanan, you consume tevel. That's the initial understanding of that machlokes, and that will be a base that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of Breda. Counters the Gemara. No. That's not the reason for this machlokes by the yain of kutim. Mimai, Dilma, Shani, Hassan. Why are you linking it to this general big machlokes of Breda or Ein Breda? No. They're kedektani taima. Why don't you keep on reading what it says in the Braisa? And the Braisa continues there, Amru loy li Rabbi Meir, hi atamoida shema yibaka hanoid. I mean, even if you subscribe to Breda, all of this works if at one point in the future you will actually separate the Trumas or Maisers. And what's going to happen, and we're speaking about not a barrel, a wineskin. That's the noid. What happens if the wineskin will crack and all the wine will spill out? In other words, if you won't end up doing it, even if you subscribe to Bereda, it's going to come out that you, God forbid, you consume tevel. If it's going to yibaka, if it's going to split. The nimsa shoysel tevelim lemafreya. And that's like a big kasha. In other words, fakert, Rabbi Yehuda might even subscribe to Bereda. But he's afraid that something will happen that won't allow you to do the action that will activate the Bereda. And v'amar lahem, Rabbi Yehuda responded, no, licheshi yibaka. If, when it will split, I'll have a problem. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to have a chayish, loy chayshinan, that it's gonna crack. Oh, so since this is a narrow issue, do you have to have a fear whether the wine barrel will get broken or not? So that's not connected to Bereida, and again, we're looking for a source. Elsewhere, we're clearly, Rabbi Yehuda opines based on him not subscribing to Bereida, and we have such a case. Ella, midetani ayoy. Ayoy is the Tana. He was the one that's quoted in the Braisa. Okay, so let's quickly chazer laws of Eruvei Techumen. For sure, midrabanan, one may not walk outside of a city, however you measure the boundaries of the city and the huts that can be within 70, a fraction amas, which extends the city. There's a way of cheshboning the boundary of the city halachically. Beyond that, a yid can only walk 2,000 amas on Shabbos. If you want to walk even further, you are allowed to make an Eruv Techumen, either doing it beraglayim, going there physically, remember, or placing foods with all of the pratim, and saying that you're being Mekabel Shabbos with your food. You only have 2,000 amos from the boundary. The question is, what's the parting point? What's ground zero? So if there is a village that is 3,000 amos away and I want to walk there, I'll put my Eruv in between my village and that village. As long as I am within 2,000 amos from one side of the Eruv, and where I want to go is within 2,000 amos from the other direction of the Eruv, that's exactly perfect. That's what the Eruv was used for. Now, one thing is clear. You cannot put two Eruvim, one to the east, one to the west, because you can only walk 2,000 amos from your Eruv, from your Makom Eruvei. The question is only, where do you begin counting it from? So there's two cases in this Braisa. Case number one is, guys, that we're living in the middle village. There's a village to the east, there's a village to the west. There is a Chacham that's coming to one of the two villages, and I don't know yet which one he's coming to. I very much want to go Shabbos and hear Fabreng with that person. I want to hear him speak, I want to hear him Fabreng, I want to daven with him. But I don't know if he's coming to the east or to the west. Case number one is, I put an Eruv to the east, I put an Eruv to the west. And I say that to whichever side the Chacham will end up going, and I'll find out by tomorrow morning, that is where I'm koina my shvisa. That is where my Eruv will be. Such a statement is good l'kula alma. But, case number two, there are two Chachamim coming. Two Fabrengers coming. One to the east and one to the west. I don't know yet which one I want to go to. And I'm putting again two Eruvs, one to the east, one to the west. They're placed in the middle of the two villages. They work. And I say tomorrow I will decide whether I want to go to the east or whether I want to go to the west. The Chachamim say, oichet gut. Now this is only if you subscribe to Bereida. Because you have to be koine shvisa prior to Shabbos. Remember in Eruvin? Bein Hashmashos. In the beginning of Bein Hashmashos, at the end of Bein Hashmashos, you can't make that decision on Shabbos. You can't place two Eruvim. If you subscribe to Bereida, you could make such a decision even on Shabbos because it goes back limafreya. And here we go, the Tani Ayoy, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, only on case number two. Ein adam masnal shnei devarim ki echad. Can't put down two Eruvim and decide on Shabbos which one you're going to use. Ella, case number one, yeah. Case number two, not. Ella, im b'chacham lemizrach, Eruv lemizrach, lemayrev, Eruv lemayrov. Case number one is where you only want to go to one village. There's only one Chacham coming. You don't know where he's coming to. That's okay. That's okay. Now hold on. If Rabbi Yehuda does not subscribe to Bereida, why is it even okay in case number one? So Gemara explained. This is the famous Gemara. You asked in the yeshiva, what's the difference? Why is case number two not good according to Rabbi Yehuda? Because he doesn't hold of Bereida. And that's taka the reason. That's another place where we see Rabbi Yehuda does not subscribe to Bereida. Well, even if there's only one Chacham coming, you didn't know before Shabbos whether it's Lemizrach or Lemayrev. You didn't know that. So anyways, you have to subscribe to Bereida because you become informed Shabbos morning. It's too late. If you don't go retroactive, you can only place an Eruv prior, again, Bein Hashmashos, related. So the Mizrach Ulamaydev, case number one, Nami Yein Bereida. And on that from Rabbi Yechanan, no. The case number one is the Chacham obviously must be he arrived at the village before Shabbos. He arrived before Shabbos. You don't know which village he arrived to. You're not leaning on Bereida. You said when you placed both Eruvim, the one where the one that's going to allow me to walk to the Chacham, that one should go into effect. It went into effect. I was not informed. I become informed Shabbos morning. But the Metzias is the Chacham was already there prior to Shabbos. So the Eruv went into effect prior to Shabbos. In case number 2, the Chachamim came to both cities prior to Shabbos. There, what will designate, what will activate the Eruv is my decision. I must decide before Shabbos. The Chachamim hold, I can decide on Shabbos, and it goes back retroactive. And Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold the Breda. Shikvar bar Chacham. Okay. So this already clarifies the Mishnah Shkalim. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda does not allow for any of the shoifaros to be designated for the kinei chayva, that's because if we will know that an owner of the chayva passed away, since he does not subscribe to Bereda, then there's no way you can throw coins out retroactively linking it to the owner. So you're going to have in here coins that have to be destroyed. Now guys, why isn't it batul? Why isn't it batul? Well, the answer is because coins, geld, money is something that's chashuv, and one of the rules of bitul is that something that's chashuv is not batul. So to prevent from that to happening, there can't be any shoifaros for chayva. So now that we disconnected the shkalim to our Mishnah, now we have to finalize our sugya. But haksiva islay clearly. V'haraya, you had a shofar for Toirim, and you had another shofar for Geizlei Oilos. Why wouldn't you confuse one with the other? They have different values. So the question is, Yom Kippurim Nami Navitrei, V'nichtav Alayu. Right, this is the part, this is the soir. Here comes the answer that Yom Kippur is different. There, for him to have to focus on yet another step is something that we are afraid. Why? Mishum Chulsha the Kohen Gadol. Because he's weak. No, we pointed out yesterday, right, that there's a certain pressure of time. It's another thing. We're trying to remove responsibilities. The lavadate, only on Yom Kippur he's not going to properly check the labels. And he might confuse one with the other, and everything will become invalidated. And that will prove that there's something unique about Yom Kippur, Chulsha the Kohen Gadol. Forget about writing. Why do you need to have anything written? You know how much blood you have from the pot more in quantity than the blood of the soir? Hanafish, it's the blood of the pot is a lot more. For hazutar, that's little. He'll simply see from the quantities which one is the pot, which one is the soir. We're just pointing out that on Yom Kippur we are afraid he won't. Punkt on Yom Kippur he won't notice that. And well, who says it's more? It's only more if you received all of the dam hanefesh. If you from the outset did not receive all of the dam hanefesh, which b'di'evet would be okay, then it might be the same amount. The Gemara says, well, first of all, that's only b'di'evet. As it says, this is the pasuk in Vayikra regarding the chatois, the es kol dam haparish b'chel yisay dam mizbeach or mizbach ha'olah, however the nusach and the pasuk is. So first of all, lachatchila you have to receive all of it. And v'chi tema dilma mishtapech minei. Well, maybe you taka received all of it and then it spilled out, and that's not a problem at all. If you have some dam left. So the Gemara says, even if it would be in the same quantity, anyways, normally the kohen would never confuse it farvas, because hay chivar, blood of the goat relative to the bull is whiter or is paler, it's whitish, it's a lighter red, and vahai, and from the bull it's sumak. So forget about you needing the writing to shed, to put light, what's what. There are so many other simanim. This is more, this is less, this is white, this is red. Elama, Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, because of Yom Kippur, lavadaite. So hachinami mishum chulsha the kohen gadol lavadaite. Okay, and now let's conclude. Now, one thing is clear, that if there was only one stand, like we spoke out when we learned the Mishnah, there is now a machlokes tanoim, not just about how many stands. Did he first put down before he picked up? Or did he have to first pick up before he put down? That's the machlokes Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, and that affects the way we daven right now. So now we're going to go through our Baal Tefilla, Shliach Tzibur, that was davening Yom Kippur, Musaf, in front of Rava, Hahu Denachas Kamei de Rava, and now this is what he was davening in the Machzor V'Amar. That Yatsa, he went out of the Kodesh Kachim, Vihi Nichoy Al Kan Sheni Shebehechel. and he placed down the kana. What is he talking about? This must have been talking about, he left after doing the so'ir lifnai v'lifnim, and he put it down on the kan sheni, clearly. So he began using the nusach that follows the chachamim. And then he says, not al dam apar v'iniach dam asoir. Mamish, the next clause was dafka l'shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Only according to Rabbi Yehuda did you first take the dam apar and then put down the dam asoir. According to the chachamim, you would always put down the dam asoir. There would be a moment when there was nothing in his hands, and then he would take the dam that he needs. So Rava corrected him. Amalei, that was chulsha of the shliach tzibur. They got confused. They didn't have a written siddur. He was doing it by heart. Chadek Rabbanan v'chadek Rabbi Yehuda. You can't say according to both. He corrected him. Hiniach dam asoir. Clearly, Rava subscribed to the chachamim. He put down the dam asoir and then the notal dam hapor. Okay, Chavre, we have another few minutes. Let's go weiter. Now that we finished the Ketaidas in the Holy of Holies, the Pod in the Holy of Holies, and the So'id in the Holy of Holies, where are we up to now? Now we are beginning to speak about the Zrika, the sprinkling of the Dam in the Holy, which was either on the Paroiches, we'll see that in next daf, or towards the Paroiches. So it says in the Mishnah, V'hizim imenu ala Paroiches. But we're ala paroiches, not to the north, not to the south, in the center, keneged aray mi bachutz. And had there been a aron hakodesh with the badim by the curtains, as we learned, you would actually mamishi where the bein habadim would be from the outside paroiches. So now, how do you know how many hazois? The Mishnah says achas lamayla v'shevel. You know what, guys? The Torah doesn't write a word of that. All it says is that you should do inside like you did. You should do in the oil mayit like you did inside. So Tanach Rabbanan, indeed. If you remember the psukim, we are Vayikra Tez Zayin, and this is now Pasik Tez Zayin. Oh, so we learned, yes, we were focusing on psukim Yudalit and Tez Vav. Remember? Damapar, Damasoy. The next Pasik, and then it says, V'chein Yaseh Lo Mayit. And by the way, the word Yaseh is extra. It could have says, V'chein Lo Mayit. So says the Braisa, says the Tana, Matamud Loimer. The word Yasa is extra. The answer is, no, Yasa means to do with all the details. Kishem shemaza lefnai velefnim, kach maza behechel. And you know what all the details means? It means it's all the details. And the Braisa speaks it out. Ma lefnai velefnim. First of all, there, you did not mix yet the par and the soil. First, achas lamay levashav lamata midam apar. Stand alone. Kach maza behechel. You took the dam apart first. Achas l'mayla v'shevel l'mata. Furthermore, kshem shalafnai v'lifnim achas l'mayla v'shevel l'mata b'dam asoir. Same thing in the heichel. Kach maza b'heichel. And now let's just finish up the end of that pasuk. It says hashoichen itam b'toich tumasan. Right, we are doing a service to God who dwells amongst us even when we're not perfect, which is beautiful. The last line, al afilu b'shasha teim tameim. Even when the yidden are tamei, nevertheless Shechina never departs from us. And now by Amar Leah, Hutzuduki the Rab Chanina, Maisa Daf Nun Zayin, Hashto, he tells him now that you guys are in Galus, Bari Tameim, Zicher, you guys are Tamei, Tameim Atan, you are rejected. And he quoted the pasuk in Echad that Tuma'asa, referring to Yerushalayim, meaning the Jewish people, we are one with Yerushalayim. Bishuleh, its Tumah is visible on her hems. Galus is when there's Tumah on us. So Amalei, so Rab Chanina right away responded, Tochazi maksiv buhu. Go and take a look what it says regarding the Yidden. Hashoichein itam betoich tumasan. Meaning, afilu bezman shehem tameim, shchina shroy b'neim. And by the way, that's the whole word of tumasa bishuleha, that the tum is on our hems. You know what a hem is? A garment is chitzonius. And the hem is the chitzonius of a Yid. Sometimes, God forbid, can become tamei. The pnimius of a Yid never becomes tamei. Okay. And God willing, to be continued.